Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning study. And we're going to continue looking at First Kings, chapter 8 and onward. But before we do, let's have a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we invite your Spirit's presence here as we open your word together. And we are very grateful that we can be here, that we can look into these things that are unfolding before us at the end of the world, that can give us a faith and a confidence in your leading. And we just pray that as your Spirit teaches us, that we can enter into the school of Christ, that we can learn of his meekness and his lowliness, and that we can trust in his providence and leading. We pray for one another. You know, the trials that each of us face. We just ask that we can be faithful to you in the things that we learn, in the light that we receive, that we can walk in it. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so morning again. Yesterday, there's just a few loose ends that we kind of tied up. So one thing that Stephen brought up is that when we were looking at the chronology that you see there, 3000 AM and BC 1004, that's from Usher's chronology, basically, I think. So he's going to have the dedication of the temple in 104 BC. So that means he would have had it completed in 105, right? Does that make sense? Right. So he's going to put this a year later, according to what they have here, and that's going to be based upon his assumed Jubilee cycle. And we looked a little bit at the fact that, you know, where people are going to count the Jubilee cycle varies. So he's going to count it after a period of 7 years from when they cross the Jordan. So he's going to count that there, and then it brings him to 104 BC. Now we have it as 106. So we know that Usher's chronology varies from the biblical chronology here and there, because Usher doesn't have some of the information that we have regarding the details of the Babylonian captivity. He also makes a few other different assumptions in some small areas. The biggest difference, of course, is we count the 480th year for the laying of the foundation of Solomon's temple. We're counting that 480 years from them crossing the Jordan River. Yeah, welcome there, Eldon and Angela. So we had looked at this chronological detail. Now it's 179,128 days, I think, from Solomon's prayer in 106 BC on the 10th or the 8th day of the 7th month. And that's, we have to draw out here and try and understand these periods of time that are given. So some interesting little details that we will have as we look at this. And I know I had this slide partially prepared, and then I lost it. Okay, guess I'll do this again. So I'm going to put all these spans of time here so we can do it in together. It might help people to visualize what we're talking about here. So we're going to have the dedication of the second temple on March 12th, 515 BC. Okay, so I'll make this a little bigger. Oops, what did I do there? Oh, I think there we go. Just for some reason I got it. I guess we got to go this way. There we go. Now I got to make it bigger. So we got March 12th, 515 BC. That's going to be in Ezra chapter 6, where they're going to dedicate this temple after they have confirmed through Darius finding the original decree of Cyrus and then permitting them to finish it. That's going to be in the summer of 516. So it's going to be 490 years to the summer of 515. And then you're going to have the rest of, so it's going to be 6 months or whatever from that decree to the completion of the temple, to its dedication on March 12th. Now that's going to be the biblical date of which this is one of those little details where we have the biblical date is the third day of the 12th month, right? So we can see it's still in the same year. So if we counted biblical years, we would be going from the biblical year in 106 to the biblical year in 516. So it's not going to be until the first day of the first month that you're going to move into the biblical year 515 if we're counting spring to spring, right? So is that clear to everyone? I know sometimes these things are all in my head. They're easy to understand for me, but if anybody has questions, you can always ask for clarification. Now, we're going to be dealing with this period of time here in a bit more detail. So over here, I'm not going to put in the Passover and all those different things that happened. But what we're going to have here, and I guess I put these different dates. So we'll first put, maybe I'll do the biblical dates at the bottom. So his prayer is going to be on the 8th day of the 7th month, right? That's what we understand, because there's going to be 7 days from that prayer that they're going to be celebrating. So I'm just going to do this. And then we're going to have another 7 days, right? And then how many days is it altogether, according to the scriptures there? They're going to have this. I know you guys are there. And so this 7 days is going to begin when? We start on the 8th day of the 7th month. If you have 7 days, the next 7 days, nobody wants to add 7 to 8 for me. Okay, so it's going to be on the 15th day. So the 15th day of the 7th month is what event begins on the 15th day of the 7th month? Do you guys have to tell me whether you're doing
Tabernacles?
Okay, so you're going to have the Feast of Tabernacles. And how many days is the Feast of Tabernacles?
7 days.
Okay, so doesn't it go from the 15th to the 22nd?
Yes, the feast itself is 7 days, but it has this additional 8th day.
Right.
Which I don't really, it's kind of an appendage, but I don't think it's recognized as the Feast of Tabernacles, but it has some additional aspect.
Yeah, so in Leviticus 23, it's going to be dealing with this Feast of Tabernacles, right? You got all these different feasts, Feast of Trumpets, Feast of Booths, they call it here. The Tabernacles, you'll hear people call it Sukkoth, right? It comes from the word booth, which is Sukkah, but Sukkoth is just plural, feminine plural. So the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, The 15th day of the 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days unto the Lord. On the first day shall be a holy convocation, and ye shall do no servile work therein. 7 days ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. On the 8th day shall be a holy convocation unto you, and ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. It is a solemn assembly, ye shall do no servile work. So they got these 2 days that bookend this feast. The first one is the first day of the 7 days. But then we have this other day at the end, which is the 8th day. It's not going to be, so this is 7 days, or you could look at it, there's a day at the beginning and a day at the end with 6 days in between, right? Which is 8 days. Does that make sense to people? So we got this 7 and then this 8, which just seems to, kind of come out of nowhere. Okay, do we agree? So if I draw this diagram here like this, you got the 8th. I'll actually put it as 8th.
I'm just thinking of the feast of Passover and unleavened bread. It just seems to be like a mirror. So you have them 7 days tabernacle, then you have an 8th day, sort of after it. And then
Okay.
Passover feast, you have Passover, 14th day, and then you have a 7-day feast of unleavened bread. So you have sort of initial first day, and then 7, and then the last feast you have 7 days, and then an 8th. Seems sort of like a type of mirror. And then when they left Egypt and they had the first encampment in a place called Sukkoth, so it was quite possible if they left early and just before sunrise on the 15th, they likely camped, then set up camp later on that day on the 15th. So that was a place called Sukkoth. So it kind of, in that name, it sort of has that name connection then to the feast of Sukkoth or Tabernacles at the end.
Okay. So we'll go over those points there. Now here, this is an old diagram I drew a long time ago, back in 2014. So you can see I got there the Feast of Tabernacles from the 15th to the 21st, and then that 22nd day at the end to show that it's 8 days, right? Now, this one doesn't really show the Passover week, or the Feast of Passover. This would be more here. The 1 week you're going to have the 15th, and then you got 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So you got 6 days there. So I guess the 14th, that you kind of end up with 8 days because of the 14th to the 21st, right? Is that how you understand it, Stephen? You
Yes.
call it 8 days when you include the 14th, but otherwise it's 7. So it's a mirror, is what you're saying.
Yes, there is accounts in the scriptures that seems to connect the Passover. It seems to call the Passover the Feast of Unleavened Bread.
Yes, yeah, they include it. So sometimes they call, the 14th the beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So that technically, the feast itself is from the 15th to the 21st, right? In how it's originally described, but often they just include the Passover as part of that. And that seems to be kind of what's happening with the Feast of Tabernacles, because they refer to 7 days and then the 8th day. So by putting these two diagrams together, you can kind of see the mirror. I don't have it drawn here as a separate mirror anywhere, because that one has the Feast of Tabernacles. The other one's focusing more on the spring types. This one is on the fall types, though I do have the spring over there at the beginning, showing there's the 6 months, and then the 7th month is where you have the fall types. So you kind of have that sabbatical cycle, but 6 and 7, and then you got the 7 and the 8 as well. So referring to this place, Sukkoth, how do you spell Sukkoth? Does it have 2 O's? How do you spell it, Sukkoth? Anybody know? I should have it.
S-U-C-O.
Oh, okay. O-T-H.
Oh.
There's not 2 C's?
I think there is 2 C's.
Yeah, there are 2 C's in the KJV.
Okay, there we go. So let's just look at this, because we have this Feast of Tabernacles, which is called Sukkoth. And you mentioned that there's a place called Sukkoth. So in Genesis, you're going to see that Genesis, Jacob journeyed to Sukkoth and built him a house and made booths for his cattle. Therefore, the name of the place is called Sukkoth. Right? So that's, I guess I can click on that so you can see it a little bit bigger. There's it, Genesis 33:17. But we have it then in Exodus. So in Exodus 12:37, the children of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Sukkoth, about 600,000 on foot that were men beside children. So you're saying that on the 15th day of Nisan, that's when they're going to leave Ramses. Now, you get them to Sukkoth, how long after that? Because this is still something that you and I, Stephen, have discussed and
Yeah.
have different
So-
ways to understand it.
So Ellen White, she says there's lots of green palm trees.
Okay.
That's where they're going to sort of make their coverings. So they haven't reached the wilderness as yet. So they're in a sense still in a fertile area.
Okay.
Canals or delta area or some connection with water anyway. There,
Yeah.
so I'm thinking they haven't gone as far as to go to the wilderness, so therefore they haven't. They've maybe just gone that particular day traveling from before sunrise, and then they're maybe they've maybe walked, a good for 11 hours maybe that day, and then they set up
So
camp.
you're saying it's the first day they're going to camp at Sukkoth, so they're not going to be fleeing for 3 days before they stop the first time.
That's what I'm thinking. I can't for sure
Yeah.
prove it. Ellen White,
Yeah,
she talks about 3 days, then third night, she says, in the third night at the Red Sea. So as to where she's going back to, I don't know. But that's
Yeah, see, I
just saying
think when she talks about the 3 days, I think she's talking about that last little leg of the trip to the Red Sea. But so part of the problem is how fast can they travel?
So
Because
not a matter of guesswork. We don't really know for sure.
well, we know that they're not going to travel faster than the animals can walk, and the people themselves
fair
are
enough.
walking as well, right? And the people themselves are walking. So even though they're organized, they're harnessed, as the Bible says. They went out harnessed. That means they're organized into groups. They're not just a random mass of people. They're doing this in an organized fashion. They still have flocks, herds. They're going to be moving fairly slow, in my estimation. Now, some people kind of have, well, God just could magically make them move really, really fast. But I have the view that they're traveling day and night as well. At first.
We have a statement, I think it's in Exodus 15 or somewhere, that it talks about eagle's wings. So wings we normally associate with speed.
Yeah,
Dogs
but
standing on that.
though it often refers to like protection as well.
Possibility, yeah.
But yeah, so some people say it'd be really, really fast. But however we look at that, we know that they're going to get to the Gulf of Suez and cross that. And then how long is it going to take them till they go from the Gulf of Suez to the area of Mount St. Catherine's? So they're not going to get there till the third month, right?
Yeah, so they do spend some time at Rephidim. And
Yeah.
they're maybe several days in Elim. So they're not going one night, moving and then come. There's kind of staying.
So the last
area.
part, yeah, so the last part of their journey, they're going to take a lot longer than the first part of the journey, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, the question is, why are they taking so long? Well, the first part of their journey, like you'd have to look at the logistics of it, but are they going to be traveling the same speed? Obviously not. So they're going to be slowing down at some point. But that's more just they're stopping more, right? So when we see these, the travels, it's in Numbers 33, right? It's going to go through all their stop-offs. So we know that it says they departed Ramses on the first month, on the 15th day of the first month, on the morrow after the Passover. So that means the Passover is on the 14th. And the children of Israel went out with a high hand in the sight of all the Egyptians. And the Egyptians buried all their firstborn, which the Lord had smitten among them. Upon the gods also the Lord executed judgments. And the children of Israel removed from Ramesses and pitched in Succoth. And they departed from Succoth and pitched in Etham, which is on the edge of the wilderness. And they removed from Etham and turned again unto Pihahiroth, which is before Baal-zephon, and they pitched before Migdol. So we're going to have, how many times are they pitching according to this? So
that's that 3 times.
Okay, so there's going to be 3 pitchings. So they leave on the 15th, right? If they pitched every night, so if we're assuming that they're not, that every day they just hike and then they camp at night, right from the beginning, which I'm not certain that that's what happens. But if we assume that, they would have got to the Red Sea on the 4th day, right? If they pitched 3 nights, right? Because they're at Ramses. So they're going to get to Succoth the first night, and they're going to depart from Succoth, pitch to Etham the second night, if that's the case, and they go from Etham again to Pihahiroth. So that's going to be the 3rd day, I guess, technically, right? So let me think how this would work. So they're going to travel from Ramses, that's day 1, Succoth day 2, Etham day 3, and then would they get to Pihahiroth on the 3rd day or the 4th day? How would we count that? Like ordinally, if they're pitching every night, pitching camp every night. So if they left on the 15th, would they be camped there on the 18th or the 19th? Is that too hard to think?
18.
So you're saying on the 18th, so that the 18th, so the 19th, so the night of the 18th, they would cross. That's what you're saying.
Possibly.
Okay. So that's if they're camping every night. Now, to get that distance, so let's say they're moving, 3 miles an hour, right? That would be, a pretty good pace. So 3 miles an hour, and they're going to just hike during the day. So that's going to be 36 miles a day times 4 days, right? Or 3 days. They're going to travel 14, 15, 16. Or 15, 16, 17 to 18. You're saying that there. So that would be times 4. So you're going to have 144 miles they would have to travel. How far is it from Ramses to, and that's assuming a pretty quick pace, I think that's too fast. But if they went 36 miles a day, they would get 144 miles. How far is it from Ramses to the Suez? And of course, they wouldn't be going in a straight line because we know they go to the wilderness of Etham and then they backtrack.
I would think roughly about 100.
You say it's 100 miles?
Maybe less.
Okay, I have more. Actually, what did I have? Okay, so some people have quite a bit less. So some people say 60 miles. So I guess it depends where you're counting from. Some have 116 kilometers, 72 miles. Okay. But people have lots of different views on the distance. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to try and do this here. So this distance from Goshen to the Gulf of Suez. So if it's you're saying 100 miles, which probably, I guess it depends where people mark it. So from Goshen to Etham is about 45 miles, they say, and the backtrack roughly another 20 or 30 miles to the Gulf of Suez. So people say total distance 60 to 75 miles. That's one theory. Okay. So any thoughts on that, this distance? So that's at 3 miles an hour. What would be the expected speed? So is 3 miles an hour too fast? So a large group of livestock can approximately cover about 12 miles per day. So you got also logistical challenges such as setting up and breaking down camp, finding water and fodder, and managing such a vast number of people and animals. So one of the problems is that the large number of people that really slows things down. So another issue that people don't often think about is bottlenecks. So what is a bottleneck? How does that affect a group of people traveling, a large group of people?
Well, it's going to impede them further because they have to squeeze through a narrow space and throng ahead of you.
Right. So we can think of it as an analogy that's often used is if you're in a movie theater and somebody yells fire and everybody rushes out the door. People just end up getting trampled, right? Because you can't have everybody go through the door at the same time. So when you're traveling, there's going to be situations where you just can't walk, however many people it is, whether it's 2 million people, you just can't walk them all together. You have to have some go ahead, others follow behind. So basically, you have a built-in traffic jam, right? So it has to be organized, but it's always going to take time to start and to stop. Right. So it's not even just as simple as one person or, walking that distance. He could say, well, I could do that distance in this amount of time. So how many kilometers could they do a day? How many miles could they do? Well, if you got, let's say it's 75 miles that they have to travel, and they can maybe do 10 miles a day, right? Then that's going to take a week or 8 days.
Doesn't an average person walk about 2 miles an hour?
Well, 3 miles an hour, if you're walking at a good pace. But the issue isn't really just the speed of a person. You have herds and flocks and children, and you have to get going, and you have to stop. You have to, break up camp, set up camp. So we have these options. We could say that they're going to travel. My view is that they travel 3 days before they set up camp. That's the position that I've taken in my understanding of this, that they're going to be moving pretty slow, relatively speaking, compared to like a small group of people. So they're going to be slower, but they need to get away from the Egyptians. And so the first day they're going to travel 3 days, day and night.
If they did travel 75 miles, and it took them 10 days, as you said, possibly, then that's a 7.5. So that's like the 7.5 years that occurred with Solomon and with David.
Yeah. So they definitely set up camp, but the question is, are they setting up camp every night? And that doesn't seem to be reasonable. But I could be wrong, right? I mean, there just could be something that I'm not thinking about. So when you have this, so the speed's going to be limited to the slowest person, right? So obviously, if somebody is really slow, they could put them on a cart or a donkey or something like that. It's just not something where you could just rush. Now, you could say God just had them, go out, and then they could just march full speed the whole time, but then they're going to stop at night, so
Yeah.
there's still going to be the logistics of stopping.
So the Bible does say there was none feeble amongst them.
Yeah. So we're not dealing with
So-
feeble, but you still have children.
Yes.
You still got little kids, right? And now, God is going to preserve them in some way. Like they're not going to. I mean, you and I, we did some backpacking, right, Stephen? And you stop and eat, you stop and rest your feet. We did whatever, like 30 kilometers some days, right? So, but we didn't have a large group of people. Now, if we would have had a million people doing that hike, it would have taken weeks just to get people onto the trail, right? Because you would have this narrow trail. You'd have to go single file. How long would it take 1 million people to go single file? So that's, to me, one of the biggest hindrances is the fact that you have bottlenecks. There's no way that you can travel through the wilderness all just in one big group. You have to have some kind of line. And the number of people, just the logistics of having a number of people moving through a small pathway, even if it's, 100 yards wide, still takes a long time, right? It's still a bottleneck. If you have 2 million people, even a football field width path is still a bottleneck, right? People agree with me there. And we would have to think that many times that the path is going to become narrower than 100 yards. They're going to have to pass through areas. So I would think that that's one of the biggest hindrances is with this large group of people.
Just looking at the geography of that part of Egypt, it does seem to be quite open. There isn't many mountains.
Parts of it are quite open, but that's, being open and being walkable, you're not going to have them, you're still going to have parts that you have to go through, marshes and things like that were there, that you have to be careful, right? It's not just a straight flat desert where you can just walk everybody all together in one big mass. There's going to have to be points where they're going to pass through passages. Now, that's one of the problems with the idea that people have that it's going to be the Gulf of Aqaba, because there you have the mountains, you have to go through all these narrow pathways and then come out onto the beach there, whatever it's called, Niama Beach. I can't remember how they pronounce it. But that would take a long time. That would take a couple of weeks for 2 million people just to get onto the beach. Right? So there becomes these real problems with people who are using the Gulf of Aqaba for the place where they cross. Plus, just they have to cross that in a night, and there's no way they could cross that even if it was drained of water in one night. So there's just lots of problems with these different ideas. So, but I could be wrong about it. Maybe I just want them to be crossing the night that the eclipse happens. Maybe the eclipse is later, but it seems to me to be pretty reasonable that when they have that solar eclipse that goes right through the path where they're going to cross the Gulf of Suez, that's going to be the night that the Pharaoh and his army is going to be drowned. And so, but then we also think about how long it takes them to get to where they're going, which isn't really much of a difference of distance. So why, like you see how it's kind of unequal in that sense. So I take the position that they cross basically 2 weeks after they leave Egypt, they leave the land of Goshen. But that I can't prove. And then when Ellen White talks about the 3 days, she's talking about that last leg that they're traveling for 3 days. So, but I don't know if we can resolve this problem. But so anyway, we're looking here at Sukkoth. I know we kind of diverged off on this journey, but the thing that Stephen has said is that Sukkoth, he's just associating that with the 15th. That is, that's if they left on the 15th and they got to Sukkoth on the 15th, then you're saying that's connecting Sukkoth to this 15th date, right? Was that what you're trying to say, Stephen? So even though it's going to be in the,
I'm just saying there seems to be like a connection.
Yeah, so you're connecting
tabernacles.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a connection because it's the same word, but you're saying that the number 15, that's what you're trying to connect.
Not necessarily, but
oh, okay,
just the name anyway.
Yeah, okay, but they are leaving on the 15th day of the first month, and we know that the Feast of Tabernacles starts on the 15th day of the 7th month, right? So So maybe it's just leaving to go to Sukkoth. That's the connection. Maybe that's just not a connection at all, just the name, not the number of the date. But it's something that we have never resolved. We've never really resolved this chronology of the Exodus as far as how long it takes them to get to cross the Red Sea. Ellen White does talk about a 3 days, and they talk about a 3 days journey. And we know that Pharaoh's armies, after they leave, they're going to eventually, however long that takes, but they're going to decide they need to get the Israelites back. So there could be a good argument for that it's just 3 days, and and then they send their army in a different route, and they come to the mountains. But part of the problem, I guess maybe they could track them and know where they went, but then they're coming from a different direction, right? You understand what I'm saying there? Like they wouldn't have known particularly which route they took unless they followed the route away and then decided to cut them off at Suez, but they already had gone to the wilderness of Etham, right? Etham. And then they're going to cross back to go on the west side of the Gulf of Suez, which the Bible refers to as the Red Sea.
Where's
they're going to cross it. What's that?
Where's Etham at?
Okay, so I'll bring up a map here so people can see what we're looking at.
So I got a map, but it's not on my map.
Yeah, okay, so I'll bring this up here. I got it in my paper on the structure of prophetic chronology where I go through all of this. Yeah, because, if we're not really familiar with how that route works. Now, this map here is the map with the eclipse. So it's the eclipse map.
Oh, so they had an eclipse on their path.
Yeah, so there's going to be an eclipse 2 weeks after the Passover, because the Passover happens on the full moon, right? And then there's going to be this eclipse on May 9th at sunset. So basically at sunset, it goes through Egypt. That red line there is the center of the eclipse. Now where they're going to cross is just north of that. So they're going to cross up here where that, I'm going to make this bigger.
That's the Dead Sea, I could see, right?
No, this is the red. This is the Gulf of Suez.
Oh, the Red Sea. Okay, there.
What the Bible calls the Red Sea, because it's the Gulf going into what we now call the Red Sea is actually a bigger area. So, so you can see over here is Cairo, up north of this. Trying to move this down. Is up here somewhere. So they have to come. I know this is in the way and I can't move it out of the way, but they're going to come down from up here and they're going to cross over here. And the wilderness of Etham is on the east side of the Red Sea, because it says when they cross the Red Sea, they're now back in the wilderness of Etham. So they're going to be in the wilderness of Etham. They're going to cross back over, and it's going to be right in this area by that red marker where they cross. Here, there's this mountain ranges, so they're caught between the mountains and the Red Sea, and then they're going to cross here, and it's going to take them all night to cross that distance, right? And you can see then, if that takes all night to cross that distance, that's a pretty small distance, but you got 2 million people that have to cross on a path, so it's going to take time. So that path through the Red Sea. So maybe, it's a pretty wide path even now, because there is actually like a land bridge, but it's got very shallow water there. How it was, in 1533 BC, how different it was. It could be a bit different, but basically it's going to be the similar structure to what they have now. So that's where they would have crossed. You can see that this eclipse is going to cross and they're going to be at the time of the eclipse is just before sunset. That they're going to witness the eclipse if that's where they're crossing the Red Sea at that time, 2 weeks later. So technically they're going to leave on the 26th. Is going to be the 26th of April is the Passover, I think, and this is going to be May 9th. So that's going to be 2 weeks.
And Sukkot borders West Manasseh, I think.
But the point is, the wilderness of Etham is over here. That's one of the problems you have if you're going to have the Gulf of Aqaba, because you're going to be crossing, you're going to be in the wilderness of Etham. You have to go around, which is a long distance, to then cross. It doesn't fit in at all with the route that people choose. They just make some argument that, well, the wilderness of Etham is on both sides. But they have no explanation of Pi Hiroth, and they just make stuff up. It doesn't really work. So anyway, we're addressing this idea of Sukkot, but we're also looking at this Exodus story, which has some symbolism in it, which is why we're looking at it. Why I think this is important. Okay, so we go back to 1 Kings. And we know that we have this chronology. So the chronology is this chronology of the 7 days and 7 days. Now we can relate the 7 days and the 7 days to the 7 years for Leah and the 7 years for Rachel. And we can relate it to the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine, right? So it's a period of 14 days, which represents 14 years. Now, if this story of Solomon, as we've understood it, is Solomon's representing the third angel's message, what would be the significance of these 7 days and 7 days, and then the 8th day to make it 15 days? What would that be symbolizing?
The 8th is of the 7.
Okay, so we could have it that it relates to, so we have this structure. We have a chiastic structure, right, with the 7 and the 7. And we've connected it to these Jubilee cycles. So we can connect Solomon's temple to the second temple, right, as a symbol, the two dedications, that 179,128 days that we have between Solomon's prayer on the 8th day of the 7th month to the 3rd day of the 12th month. So that's 490 years plus 5 months. Okay, so we have that. So we have this symbol. There's something about that, the number of days there, that we have to take into account. Now in this account here, so I think we actually have to go to Chronicles, and it's going to be, so here, temple furnishings are brought into the temple. Solomon blesses the people. Okay. Now this is going to add detail. So one is we have the fire coming down from heaven. That's not mentioned in 1 Kings, right? In 1 Kings, we don't have that account of the fire coming down from heaven to consume the sacrifices. And it's going to have a lot more detail about the sacrifices. But it's this detail here, 2 Chronicles 7:9, where it talks about the 8th day they made a solemn assembly, for they kept the dedication of the altar 7 days and the feast 7 days. Okay, so Angela's noticed some things here just about these verses. So you have here Genesis 32:17. So that's going to be where we first have Sukkoth mentioned, right? And it's 3217 is the scrambling of 1732, or really it's got the 3 and the 2 and the 17 just switched, right? So you could just say it is the 17th verse of the 32nd chapter. So it would represent the number for David. And then you had 7 days for the cleansing of the temple. I don't know what 2 CE, and the 8th day for the priests. and Levites in 2nd Chronicles. Okay, so you're referring to in 2nd Chronicles 29, where it talks about the 8 days and the 8 days for the priests and the Levites cleansing the temple. So they cleanse that 2 times. Is something not your abbreviation?
Well, because 2 parts of the temple were cleaned.
Okay.
Yeah, the trash was
Okay.
removed.
Okay, yeah, but you got the most holy place and then the holy place cleansed. Priests cleanse the most holy place, and then the Levites clean the holy place. And they do it in 7 days and 7 days. Okay, so there we have that. Or isn't it 8 days and 8 days? Right, that one's 8
Well, I
days.
think they did the cleaning for 7 days, and then they ceased and did whatever on the 8th day.
Okay, because I thought it was 8 days and 8 days. Let's look at that. So 2nd Chronicles 29. Hezekiah cleans the temple. So it says here, they began on the 1st day of the 1st month to sanctify, and on the 8th day of the month came they to the porch of the Lord. So they sanctified the house of the Lord in 8 days, and in the 16th day of the 1st month they made an end. So it's 8 and 8 instead of 7 and 7. But there still is this mirror. So the first time we get Sukkoth, we have that connection of that symbol. And then here in this one, we got 7-9. So just like Ezra 7-9, we got 2nd Chronicles 7-9. So the 8th day they made a solemn assembly, where they kept the dedication of the altar 7 days and the feast 7 days. So they have the dedication of the altar, which is really all of these sacrifices, right? They're dedicating the altar with these sacrifices for 7 days. And then they have the Feast of Tabernacles 7 days, right? But here it does, then it says on the 23rd day of the 7th month, he sent the people away. So it doesn't particularly here mention the 22nd, right? By itself. It just says on the 8th day, they made a solemn assembly. So it's going to be 7 days, and then the 8th day, which is the 15th day. Our people agreed with that. Let's chart again. So we got the 7 days, and then so that's going to be the 22nd day, 7th month. So that's what that day is going to be. Right now, it's not important what dates they are on our calendar particularly. But this is then going to be from this to this date is, what number did I have? So we're going to go from so if we go from the 8th, sure what's time. So if we go from the 8th day of the 7th month, which is October 8th in 106 BC, then we're going to have 179,128 days to March 12th, 515, which is the 12th day of the 3rd month. Okay. So 179, 128 days. So it's 490 years and 5 months. The 7th month to the 12th month. Okay. What other significance can we see in this? And so it's 160 days, more than 490 years, if we're doing solar years. But I guess I could figure it out a bit more if I went from here. So I'm going to go see. I'm going to subtract 160 days. Okay, so it would bring me to 516. We have to go to October to get to the 8th day of the 7th month. So if I'm going to get the solar year, so in 516, the 8th day of the 7th month. Okay, it's interesting. So 178984. So the difference, if we take the biblical year, okay, so here's what I'm doing. You'll see why this is significant. Okay, so we got this date is the biblical date, right? So that's the 8th day of the 7th month. So I'm going to copy this and put it over here. So from the 8th day of the 7th month to the 8th day of the 7th month in 516. So that period of time, I'll blow this. Now, maybe I'll just do it this way. So the number of days from the 8th day of the 7th month in 516 to March 12th, 515, so 516 to 515, is 144 days. Is that significant? Is that an important detail?
144. That's, that seems to say something.
Yeah. So that's 490 years plus 144 days on the biblical calendar. So we're going from the 8th day of the 7th month to the 8th day of the 7th month, 490 years, and to the dedication of the temple, the second temple, from the dedication of the first temple is, 490 years plus 144 days, right? Biblical years, right? So taking, because the biblical year doesn't always line up with the solar year, right? So in this case, 490 years doesn't line up. Okay, so that's a detail I never noticed before. So what is Solomon's temple representing? What is it that we're seeing here in this structure? I'll draw more stuff in later on and get this kind of cleaned up a bit. So we're connecting Solomon's temple with the second temple. Now, can we say that Solomon's temple, that this dedication represents October 22nd, 1844, even though it's not at the Day of Atonement, it's 2 days before. But it's representing that Millerite history, the arrival of the third angel's message, just with the temple part of it. Because there's other ways we could draw this line. And so having the 144 days at the end and the 490 years preceding those 144 days, what does that represent? If we're going to count from October 22nd, when the third angel's message arrives, we have this structure, and we have 144 days at the end, the 490 years preceding it. Now we know that we have lots of different lines that intersect, and we know that in the line dealing with the 3 decrees, that we have this is the second angel's message. The rebuilding and the dedication of the temple is connected to the second angel's message. But here we're just looking at if this is Millerite history, can we see that it's lining up with the second angel's message, joining the third angel in our history? I mean, I see what the structure is, but I want you guys to see it. Do you see that we could line this up with our history from Millerite history to that this history of the second temple represents the second angel's message in our history?
That could work.
Yeah. So, and this is the thing, that when we look at this third angel's message of Solomon, because what we have done with every other line, and again, I'm just repeating myself, but it becomes clear every time we go over this. We know that Solomon is the third angel's message. And the third angel's message does not arrive in our line. We're in the time we have the repeat of Millerite history is the repeat of the first and second angel's message. It's not a repeat of the third. Now, the first and second angel's message join the third to empower it. And so we could look at the first temple as Millerite history. Solomon is Millerite history. And this dedication of the temple representing October 22nd, 1844. And then we look at the dedication of this temple connected with 144 days, more than 490 years, as our history, the history of the 144,000. And so maybe in drawing Solomon's line, our primary way to look at it is that Solomon's history represents the history of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the history of the third angel's message. Now, it doesn't mean we couldn't take Solomon and put him into some kind of line where we could see that Solomon has a line of his own that parallels our history. But when we look at this context of Saul, David, and Solomon, this seems the best way to look at Solomon. The other thing to fit in with what we've been saying about our line, about our history and where we are now, is when we got to January 11th, somebody have a comment to make? I hear voices.
Yeah, I was going to ask,
Okay.
then the empowerment of the third angel hasn't arrived yet.
Yeah, it did. That's 9/11.
Okay, so that was the empowerment of the third angel's message.
Yeah, on Ellen White's line,
Okay.
the third angel's message is empowered when the mighty angel of Revelation 18 comes down, and that's 9/11. Now we zoom into 9/11, and we see that there's the first and second angel's message preceding, right? Like you need the first angel's message preceding 9/11, and 9/11 is the arrival of the second in Ellen White's line, but in our line, it's the empowerment of the first angel, right? So within our line, the second angel arrives on November 9th, 2019. And then we've been in that time of the second angel. And then we get to January 11th, 2026. And we now, in looking at these lines, the way that we've structured them, we realize that Solomon, that we've moved to an understanding of Solomon in our studies. We did Saul and David. Now we're doing Solomon. And it shows that there's a change in our movement that has occurred. You know, it's not like we predicted it exactly, but we did have the structure, the 8,888 days. And that relates to the 8 days and the 8 days, the number 8. So there's a relationship there to the cleansing that happens in the time of Hezekiah, which we've used to parallel our history of the priests and Levites. So you can see then that this fits with the third angel's message being this history of Adventism. Now, Solomon is going to have he's going to represent then the third angel's message from October 22nd to ours. And we can see then his establishing of the sanctuary, the temple, and its dedication would parallel with Millerite history. Now we have, in Millerite history, October 22nd, we have the Sabbath that's going to show up, right? Now here, there's 2 periods of 7 days. So we'd have to figure out what that means. And then we have this 8th day. So what does that mean? If we're going to say that that's Millerite history, this structure there, then what do these mean? Well, we could say it has to do with the 2520, right? The 2 1260s, sort of symbolizing that as well. But then we would move the 8th day over. So the 8th day, even though it's the end of the Feast of Tabernacles, you know, we have the 10th day of the 7th month is going to be the 3rd day of their 7-day feast for the altar. But it still could be representing, that whole thing could be representing the end of the prophetic periods. The 2 1260s, the 2 7 days, would represent the 7 times 252 and the 7 times 252. And do we have it divided into 2 and 5, like in the story of Joseph, with the 7 years, the 7 and the 2 and the 5? It's like a mirror. But then at the end we have this 8th. So even though the 7 days kind of mirrors that structure, the 8th, that would be the 46 years from 1798 to 1844. So even though this overall structure is 490 years plus 144 days, it would represent 129 days if we took the 15 days off. And what do the 129 represent?
I don't remember.
What about a 10th of the 1290? How would that make sense?
That can work.
Okay, so we could look at this as different ways of doing this. So I could go here and taking those 15 days off and saying this is, so you can see how this can represent the two 1260s. Where did that 7 days come from? Okay, we got the two 1260s, right? The seven, we could look at it that, or it could even be the 27 times 252s. So this would go all the way back to, Abraham blessing his 12 sons, and then this would be 723, and then this would be 1798, right? Is that right? No, 34 AD, pardon me, and then 1798. And then this would be the 46 years from 1798 to 1844 would be the 8th, right? That's one way we could look at that. So then this would be from here to here, it's going to be 15 less days. So this would be whatever it's going to be. So 179. Oops. Yeah, 179. And 113 days. Oops. There we go. Right. So that would make this period here. So how would I do that? I would have to create another period here that's going to be 129 days. So I guess, yeah, I'll draw this out later because we only got a little bit of time. So, but we have 129, so that represents the 1290. So it's just pointing to the time of the end, I guess. Yeah, I'd have to figure out how to draw that so it looks neat. So what have we learned here? So we've gone kind of a circuitous route a bit. We went back to the Exodus and came back to this history of Solomon and then into our history, Adventist history. But we can see then this dedication of the temple connects with the dedication of the second temple. And we can see then that the first temple is going to represent Millerite history and the second temple represents our history. Now, we know that it represents our history. Why? What is it about the history of the second temple that specifically represents our history rather than Millerite history? Even though it represents Millerite history as well, but in this context, what is there about the second temple that relates to our history?
Solomon had more wisdom and asked for wisdom. They have more light.
Okay, well, yeah, I don't know if that helps. That might hinder the parallel.
Yeah.
But so we see that it's a repeat. So that's one thing, right? We got the dedication of Solomon. That's the first temple, and we have the second. So we can see that parallels it. But specifically, what is it that we've learned from the dedication of the temple that relates specifically to our history? Like, we know it relates to Millerite history because we can look at the 3 decrees and we can see that those line up with the 3 angels' messages. So the 3 decrees that begin the 2300 days are parallel to the 3 angels' messages that end the 2300 days. So we have that. But then when we look at where the history of the second angel, right, we can even see within those decrees, the second decree represents our history of the second angel. We repeat the first angel, right? And then we're going to have, in the first angel, we're going to have, Cyrus. Cyrus is going to be what president? What president of the United States is Cyrus?
Reagan.
No, that's Darius the Mede who represents Reagan.
Okay, so it would be Bush. 1.
Right, so Bush the first. Okay. And then we're going to have, after Cyrus, we have Cambyses, so he's going to represent Clinton. And then after Cambyses, we have False Murtis, so he's going to represent who?
Obama.
No, you're going to have Bush the second in there.
I notice we overlook Jimmy Carter all the time.
Yeah, well,
You can't go from Bush the first to Bush the second because there's Obama in the middle of it.
Well, Obama's after Bush. We had Clinton in the middle.
Okay, so you have Bush the first, then you have Clinton.
Didn't we already do Clinton? Yeah. So Clinton's going to be Cambyses, right? And then Darius is going to be Bush the first, right?
Bush the second.
Oh yeah, Bush the second. I mean, right? And
Okay.
and 9/11 happens in which king's reign?
Bush the second.
Okay. So can we see that the Second Temple, it happens in the time of Bush the second?
All right.
Right? Makes sense? Okay. And then after, so that's 9/11. So we're going to say that that's marking 9/11, and Darius is marking, or that's false Smyrtus, right? Is going to be
Correct.
anything. So we got Cambyses, false Smyrtus. Okay. Now he's going to stop the building of the temple. So let me see here. I'm just making sure. Here, I gotta bring it up. Let's look at this again. We got. Okay, so false Smyrtus is Bush the second. So yeah, so it's going to be Obama that aligns with Darius. So it's going to be in the time of Darius that you're going to have 9/11. Well, you're going to it's going to be in the time of Bush the second. You have 9/11. So Obama's after 9/11, right? So that doesn't fit if we're going to put the Second Temple there. But you do have false Smyrtus. He stops the building of the temple. Darius then commences it. And then you're going to have Xerxes, which is Trump. So we'd have to figure out how that works. And then we got Artaxerxes, which lines up with Biden. And then we got Artaxerxes that lines up with Trump. Okay, so we're going to have to think about this a little bit. But we can see Bush the first lines up with Cyrus, which is how we've always done it. And this is an old chart, right? I mean, I edited it in that I added a Biden and Trump again. And I added the Augustus, Tiberius, Claudius, Caligula, Nero, and the 666, the year of the three emperors, and then Vespasian. I've added those. But originally this chart was made with the lining up of Cyrus, Cambyses, false Smyrtus, Darius, and Xerxes with Trump. And then I just had question marks for Biden and Trump. I didn't have Biden and Trump in there. So that was made a long time ago, right? So, right, because you can see I have the other things too from that history. And this is, you can tell by the way the chart looks too that it's an old chart. So I did things differently back then.
Isn't Xerxes like Artaxerxes?
No. Well, what happened is the Greeks conflated the two, so they thought Xerxes was the same person as Artaxerxes in some instances, right? So we can see the fact that they're both Trump kind of lines up with that misunderstanding. So things that are attributed to Xerxes that actually are Xerxes, they think is Artaxerxes. So there's a bit of confusion with the Greek historians regarding those two. And we see that when we study the book of Esther, right? Because they're going to refer to, like the Apocryphal book, they're going to refer to Xerxes as Artaxerxes.
Yeah.
Right, rather than Ahasuerus, right?
Definitely, similar.
Yeah, so there's that conflation of them, but we know it's Xerxes, and even in the name Ahasuerus, that's actually really a distortion of Artaxerxes. Really, in the King James, they're referring to him as Artaxerxes, in a sense, just because of how they're translating that, right? So in people's minds, that's Artaxerxes, but it's Xerxes. So Ahasuerus is Xerxes. But it's probably more a title than anything. So it's really unclear about their namings of these, because these are sort of Grecanized versions of Persian kings' names. Okay. Anyway, that we can see then we have some work to do in sorting this out. Any final thoughts before we close with prayer? Okay. Well, let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful again for the time that we've had here. And we just pray that as we continue to study, that we can understand these things more clearly. We know, Lord, that your Spirit wants to fill us and control us and guide us so that we can accomplish this work that needs to be done upon this earth. So we just ask for your help. And we ask that your angels watch over each one, that you care for us and help us to trust in you. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.